Hello and welcome to another highlight video of the European Communication Monitor 2024-25. My name is Caroline Siegel and I'm the project manager of the European Communication Monitor. Today I'm here with Professor Aurélie Laborde from Bordeaux Montaigne University in France, who is part of the ECM research team and will give us some insights into one of the key topics of this year's study, which is managing communications in times of geopolitical crises and risks. Hi Aurélie.
Hello, Caro. Thank you.
So, Aurélie, before diving into your topic, please tell me what is specific about this year's ECM?
Many of you already know European Communication Monitor. This is an academic study exploring corporate communication practices in Europe since 2007. This year, we start a new research design based on a qualitative approach. The new European Communication Monitor offers insights based on qualitative interviews with 13 chief communication officers representing the top 300 companies in Europe. It is an exceptional opportunity to take the time to talk in depth with the CCOs of Europe's largest companies about the issues that concern them and their company.
Well, thank you, Aurélie. So my next question for you would be, what did you explore in this year's ECM and how did you do it?
The key theme for this year is tensions. How are big companies, communication departments, and chief communication officers managing and dealing with tensions? Tensions appear when managers are faced with contradicting yet equally important alternatives in decision-making, such as innovation versus consolidation or continuity versus change. Tensions force leaders and organizations to make difficult choices. Such contradictions are an essential element for any organizations. And top leaders, including, of course, chief communication officers, are particularly affected by tensions in decision-making. Managing tension is the new normal for communication leaders nowadays and a key driver of excellence. At the macro level, our research focuses on the geopolitical issue. We explored three main research questions. First one, how do geopolitical crises affect or impact communication strategies and activity? Second one, which tensions are experienced when dealing with geopolitical crises in corporate communications? And third one, how are such tensions evaluated and managed by companies? The research design for this study is multi-method approach with qualitative interviews combined with quantitative pre-survey. We interviewed in March and April 2024, 30 chief communication officers from 10 different countries among the largest companies in Europe. The CCOs have on average 22 years professional experience and 70 years in a leadership position in communications. Here you can see the companies and their characteristics.
Thank you, Aurélie. So my next question for you would be, of course, what are the key insights regarding the geopolitical topic?
Our first research question was, how do geopolitical crises affect or impact communication strategies and activities? Geopolitical risks are defined here as threat, occurrence, or escalation of adverse events related to war, terrorism, or any conflict between states and political actors that affect economic activity, political decision, and social dynamics on a global scale. Our research shows several things. First one, that the acceleration of crises has far-reaching implications for communication strategy and activities. Geopolitical risks and crises affect companies differently depending on their business activities and global presence, of course, but most observe new and important changes in communications. The war in Ukraine and the conflict between China and Western countries were the most frequently mentioned issues in the March interviews. But the conflict in the Middle East was already a major issue. Several CCOs perceive the pace of the crisis to be increasing, as you can see in the first quote. Second, in addition to the acceleration and internationalization of crises, the change for communications comes from rising stakeholder expectations, with most respondents reporting an increased demand for companies to take a stand, from consumers from employees and society. This stakeholder pressure is all the more difficult to manage as it takes place in increasingly polarized, politicized, and emotional conversation inside and outside the organization. Third, global companies are largely used to handling crisis course, including geopolitical ones with operational crisis management models in place. But today, geopolitical risks are both accelerating and evolving, forcing companies to rethink or adapt their communication practices. For many communicators, these changes present major challenges. And several CCOs interviewed mention a really difficult time and a massive responsibility, rewarding but terrifying. In this context, the main challenge is to adapt, as one CCO said, in the best possible way to this new and volatile context. Several crises cited by the Chief Communication Officer often lead to difficult situations. The difficulties the most frequently experienced are actively positioning the company and its top leaders, responding to stakeholders and media, anticipating the geopolitical risk and opportunity, and managing controversial debates within the company at the same time, and also respecting different perspectives of external stakeholders. Our research focuses on tensions, and the interviews reveal several tensions for corporate communication related to geopolitical issues. The most frequently mentioned is the tension between taking a position or remaining neutral. This question is made all the more difficult by the fact that companies are now being asked to take a position on issues unrelated to their core business, and that they have to speak out in a world that is both global and fragmented. Another tension concerns social engagement, fostering trust, and associated reputational risk. The key question is, as one CCO said, how to be sensitive to our context, but remain kind or consistent with how we think business should be operated. For a long time, the communications industry has demanded and defended the idea of companies speaking out on issues beyond their strictly business concerns. Today, however, communication are taking a step back, pointing out that companies have a duty of discretion when it comes to political and geopolitical issues. Another tension concerns the difficulty of bringing together perspectives that are difficult to reconcile between the rationalities of running a business and then an increasingly emotional, politicized world. Last main tension concerns the difficulty of reconciling local expectation with the global strategy. In a fragmented and globalized world, delivering a message that satisfies everyone is extremely difficult and often is simply impossible. The question for global corporate communications is how to be as relevant as possible in one country and at the same time on a global scale. Last but very important point, most of the CCOs interviewed agree that the most significant changes concern internal audiences. For global companies, geopolitical issues now often infiltrate internal discussions. As one CCO said, you import conflicts that the company cannot do anything about. You import this conflict into your own population, and that is not beneficial for the company. For several interviewees, employees' pressure to take a stance has considerably increased in recent years. Employees try and push the company into places that will become very difficult, and for many CCOs, there's always a complicated balancing act. Such internal pressures are described as more challenging than external stakeholder pressure. One CCO reports in relation to the conflicts in the Middle East, I have never ever experienced in 25 years emotions running this high within the company. The expectations of younger generation, but also the speed and transparency of social media have exacerbated these challenges. In our study, we looked at how companies perceive, manage, and evaluate positively or negatively the tensions associated with geopolitical risk. Most of the chief communication officers interviewed, nearly 80%, see the current geopolitical crisis as a risk, and some of them see it also as an opportunity, nearly 30%. The opportunity lies in the changing role of communications departments as they become involved in geopolitical risk management. Otherwise, the new role of organizations as political actors is mostly perceived as a threat. In the face of geopolitical risk and crisis, companies implement solutions. First is social listening and monitoring processes inside and outside the company to anticipate, formulate strategies, control the environment, and protect investment or communicate and position narratives. Many of CCOs interviewed also report that the communications function is central to crisis and geopolitical risk management, closely linked to public affairs. Some have managed the last geopolitical crisis very closely with public affairs team and will continue to do so. Another point mentioned is the importance to evolve narratives and positions. Above all, managing narrative with vigilance and prudence, being able to deal with paradoxes and ambiguities, to react quickly, to be flexible, to be transparent, and at the end, to take responsibility. This requires strategies for explaining and framing the company's position. This requires also communicators who are open-minded, diplomatic, and able to understand different points of view and cultural perspectives. The communications function needs to organize itself on a global scale and ensure that decision makers and communicators in all countries are aware of both local issues and global strategy. Finally, in an unpredictable world characterized by acceleration and urgency, companies need to develop communication governance frameworks to guide their day-to-day actions. Some of the companies interviewed have already put processes in place to objectify decisions on whether or not to take a communicative stance on certain issue.
Well, thank you, Aurélie. So my next question, after hearing these great insights, is, of course, what does this mean for the practice now?
The political and international events of recent years, combined with increased pressure for stakeholders, have led to a significant change in the way companies participate in the international arena. Our research shows that in this context, companies are adapting their communication strategies, but many current practices are evolving and will continue to evolve. When analyzing the strategies of the CCOs interviewed, 4 key points can be highlighted. First, anticipation is the key to dealing with geopolitical risk in corporate communication, and many companies are setting up an infrastructure of listening and scenario planning. Second, consolidation is another key, and moderating discussions within global organizations is as important as monitoring external stakeholder and debates. Third, connecting. Companies should foster a network of leaders and communications experts with diplomatic skill and sensitivity to cultural perspectives. Fourth, navigating and taking responsibility. Managing the communications of an international company means choosing what to say and what not to say in ambiguous and paradoxical situations. And these are often difficult to manage and a source of great tensions.
Well, thank you, Aurélie, for providing us with these very, very interesting insights. So last but not least, please let me ask you, where can we find out more about the study?
You will find our full report and videos on the other main topics of this study, artificial intelligence and managerial learning, on our website. And of course, we're preparing research articles to report on all the richness of the interviews we conducted across Europe. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Aurélie, for taking the time.